By the end of this review, you'll know if Path of Exile 2 deserves a spot on your playlist or if it's worth skipping. Let's break down the game, all in simple terms so you can decide for yourself. The game kicks off with Act 1, which feels familiar if you've played the first Path of Exile. Your character wakes up on a mysterious shoreline surrounded by undead enemies. Armed with a basic weapon, you're thrown right into combat. But here's where things feel fresh. The animations and visuals are massively improved. Every swing, every hit, and every reaction from enemies looks and feels satisfying. Combat used to be a bit clunky in the original game. It often felt like you were just stacking numbers to make attacks stronger. But in Path of Exile 2, every skill feels impactful right from the start. Whether you're smashing enemies with a hammer or firing off magical projectiles, the gameplay is smoother and more rewarding than ever. Path of Exile 2 introduces 12 distinct classes, each offering unique playstyles. The game's absurd level of customization ensures your experience will be entirely different depending on your choices. Even within the same base class, builds can diverge dramatically. Take the warrior class, for example. Your version might wield totems to unleash massive area of effect explosions, while another player could focus on a fire-centric build with war cries and bleed-enhancing weapons. With a simple reset, you can reconfigure your character around a unique weapon drop, supported by gems and the massive passive skill tree. Think of it as thrifting for builds. You never know when you'll stumble upon something game-changing. Throughout the demo, new skill gems drop regularly, keeping combat exciting. These gems define your abilities, and they're super flexible. Take, for example, a skill called Killing Palm. It lets you teleport to an enemy and deliver a fatal blow if their health is low. Pair it with Falling Thunder, which sends out electrifying damage, and finish with Wave of Frost, a move that freezes enemies and lets you reposition. Unlike the first game, where players often stuck to one skill, Path of Exile 2 encourages experimenting with combos. The variety adds depth and keeps things fresh. You're not just spamming one ability, you're chaining moves together and thinking about strategy. Here's where things get tricky. The boss fights in Path of Exile 2 are intense. They're clearly inspired by games like Dark Souls, with tough enemies that deal massive damage if you're not careful. Every class now has a dodge roll to avoid attacks, which is a great addition. But some bosses rely heavily on area of effect attacks, making it hard to avoid damage even if you're quick on your feet. For example, in Act 1, there's a side quest where a friendly character turns into a horrifying boss. They slam the ground with powerful AoE attacks that drain your health fast. As the fight progresses, they start summoning obstacles that slow you down, making it even harder to dodge. It's challenging, but it can also feel frustrating when you have to repeat the fight multiple times. Later acts ramp up the difficulty even more. One particular boss in Act 4 uses attacks that can one-shot your character if you're not careful. Add in mechanics like health regeneration for the boss, and the fights can start to feel less fun and more exhausting. If you've played Path of Exile before, you know how important gear is. The game has always had a deep crafting system that lets you improve your items using special currency. In the demo, though, crafting felt limited. The drop rates for crafting items were incredibly low, meaning you couldn't upgrade your gear as often as you'd like. Without the crafting bench, which allowed for more predictable upgrades in the original game, gear progression felt random. Most of the time, you're just hoping for a good drop from an enemy or a vendor. While the developers have said that more crafting options will be available in the full game, the demo left a lot to be desired in this area. One thing Path of Exile 2 does really well is making the game more approachable for newcomers. If you're worried about the complexity of the first game, don't be. The new skill system gives you clear, guided options for building your character, especially in the early game. Let's say you pick up a new skill gem. The game offers recommendations based on your weapon or playstyle, so you're not left guessing what works best. Of course, experienced players can still dive deep and experiment, but the streamlined guidance makes it easier to understand the basics without needing hours of research. What really stands out in Path of Exile 2 is how good the combat feels. Every attack is flashy, satisfying, and impactful. Whether you're dealing massive area damage or landing precise strikes, the visual and sound effects make each moment exciting. Enemies react to your attacks in ways that feel real. They stagger, explode, or fly back depending on your moves. It's a big improvement over the original game, where combat sometimes felt flat. It's worth noting that Path of Exile 2 borrows some elements from a mode called Ruthless. introduced in the first game. This mode is designed for hardcore players who enjoy a tougher challenge, with fewer item drops and less crafting flexibility. If you're someone who likes high-stakes gameplay, this might be a welcome addition, but for casual players, it can make progression feel unnecessarily slow and punishing. Path of Exile 2 is shaping up to be a worthy sequel, but it's not without flaws. The character customization, improved visuals, and engaging combat are all major highlights. The skill system feels fresh and encourages creativity, and the game's overall polish is impressive. However, the boss fights can be overly punishing, and the crafting system feels like a step back compared to the original game. These issues might be addressed in the full release, but for now, they're worth keeping in mind. If you love deep customization and challenging gameplay, Path of Exile 2 has a lot to offer. And that's a wrap on Path of Exile 2. If you're into epic adventures and want to explore more, we've got something for you. Check out our full review of World of Warcraft: The War Within. See you in Azeroth.